Not every television show leaves a mark on your soul. Most come and go, forgotten before the credits finish rolling. But every now and then, a single episode of a single show does something extraordinary. It reaches through the screen, grabs you by the heart, and refuses to let go. The Andy Griffith Show was that kind of series. For 8 remarkable seasons, it invited millions of Americans into the quiet, unhurried world of Mayberry, North Carolina, where the sheriff never carried a loaded gun and neighbors still sat on front porches after supper. It was the kind of place people didn't just watch. They wished they could live there. But hidden inside that warm and familiar world was one episode so emotionally devastating that many viewers have never fully recovered from watching it. An episode that didn't end with laughter. An episode that ended with silence, regret, and the unbearable weight of a chance that came too late. Some fans have called it banned. Others have called it cruel. Almost everyone who has seen it calls it unforgettable. And at the center of it all stands Barney Fife, the bumbling, lovable deputy who could make an entire room laugh without saying a single word. Don Knotts brought that character to life with a genius that television rarely sees. But in this episode, it isn't the comedy that defines him. It's the moment his face falls. It's the moment his eyes go quiet. It's the moment every viewer watching at home understood exactly what had just happened, even before a single word of explanation was spoken. The story behind this episode runs deeper than most people realize. It didn't arrive out of nowhere. It grew from years of choices, years of delays, and years of a man who kept assuming tomorrow would be good enough. Barney Fife spent season after season keeping Thelma Lou waiting. There was always another distraction, always another reason to put off what truly mattered. And Thelma Lou, patient and loyal beyond what anyone deserved, kept believing he would eventually come around. She kept believing in a future that Barney never quite committed to building. Then one day, without warning, the future arrived. And it didn't look anything like what Barney had imagined. To understand why this episode cuts so deeply, you first need to understand the world that created it. You need to understand the man behind the badge, the friendships that shaped the show, and the quiet heartbreak that was always hiding just beneath Mayberry's perfect surface. Because this isn't just a story about a television episode. It's a story about what happens when we take the people we love for granted and realize the truth only after it's far too late. Mayberry wasn't built in a day. Before it became one of the most beloved fictional towns in American television history, it existed only as an idea in the mind of a quiet, humble man from Mount Airy, North Carolina. Andy Samuel Griffith was born in June 1926, and from the very beginning, life asked a great deal from him. His parents, Carl and Geneva, struggled with money in ways that most people today can barely imagine. There were stretches of time when they simply couldn't care for him at all, leaving young Andy in the hands of relatives while they worked to get back on their feet. When he finally returned home, the house his father had managed to buy was nearly empty. No furniture to speak of. No proper bed for the baby. Just a dresser drawer pulled open and laid flat, turned into the only cradle the family could offer. That was where Andy Griffith began his life. In a drawer. In a house with almost nothing inside it. And yet, something extraordinary was already growing in that boy. It just needed the right moment to reveal itself. That moment came through music. As Andy grew older, he discovered that sound could do what words alone never could. It could fill a room, change a mood, and make people feel something they hadn't expected to feel. For a shy boy who spent most of his childhood trying to disappear into the background, music was the first place he ever felt truly visible. He sang. He played instruments. He listened, absorbed, and practiced until performing stopped feeling like something he did and started feeling like something he was. A minister at his church named Ed Mickey recognized the gift early and helped sharpen it, teaching Andy technique, encouraging his voice, and opening doors the young man didn't even know existed. That guidance nearly sent Andy down an entirely different road. After graduating high school in 1944, he enrolled at the University of North Carolina with plans to study theology and become a minister himself, following the path his mentor had walked. But the stage kept calling. And Andy Griffith, as it turned out, was constitutionally incapable of ignoring it. He changed direction, pursued a degree in music instead, and threw himself into university life with a passion that surprised even the people closest to him. He led music fraternities, starred in theatrical productions, and gradually transformed from a quiet boy who blended into walls into a young man who commanded every room he entered. Nobody watching him then could have predicted Mayberry. But everyone watching him then could see that something remarkable was on its way. Fame, when it finally arrived, didn't knock politely on Andy Griffith's door. It kicked it clean off the hinges. But before the television cameras and the network contracts and the Nielsen ratings, there was a comedy record. A simple, unhurried comedy record that nobody expected to amount to very much. In 1953, Andy released a monologue called What It Was Football, a routine built around a small-town preacher trying to make sense of a college football game he had wandered into by accident. The humor was gentle, observational, and deeply American in a way that felt completely effortless. Audiences didn't just enjoy it. They embraced it like something they had been waiting for without knowing it. The recording climbed all the way to number 9 on the national charts, introducing Andy Griffith to millions of people who had never heard his name before. That unexpected success opened doors almost immediately. Television came first, then Broadway, then Hollywood. His stage performance in No Time for Sergeants earned him a Tony Award nomination and a Theatre World Award for Outstanding Broadway Debut. Critics who saw him perform described something almost impossible to explain. Andy Griffith didn't need elaborate setups or carefully crafted punchlines. He simply walked onto a stage, opened his mouth, and people loved him. There was an authenticity to everything he did that couldn't be manufactured or taught. Director Elia Kazan saw it immediately when casting a face in the crowd in 1957, choosing Andy for the lead role of Lonesome Rhodes, a manipulative and explosive drifter whose charm hid a deeply corrupt interior. It was a radical departure from everything audiences associated with Andy Griffith, and he delivered it with a conviction that left critics genuinely stunned. For a man known for warmth and gentleness, playing darkness came at a personal cost. But he did it completely. Then came the moment that changed the entire trajectory of his life. When No Time for Sergeants was adapted into a feature film in 1958, Andy returned to the role of Will Stockdale and found himself sharing scenes with a nervous, wiry actor named Don Knotts. Their chemistry was instant and undeniable, the kind that casting directors spend entire careers searching for and almost never find. Two men from completely different backgrounds, with completely different energies, who somehow made each other funnier simply by standing in the same room. Neither of them knew it yet, but they had just formed the partnership that would define both of their careers. They had just found the friendship that would eventually build Mayberry. And Mayberry, as the whole world was about to discover, was exactly what America needed most. Building Mayberry wasn't as simple as it looked. Nothing that appears effortless on screen ever is. The Andy Griffith Show premiered in October 1960, and from its very first episode, it carried a warmth that felt unlike anything else on television at the time. But behind that warmth, behind those quiet streets and friendly faces and unhurried afternoons, there were tensions and compromises and creative battles that most viewers never suspected. Andy Griffith had originally assumed he would be the show's primary source of comedy. He was the star, after all. His name was in the title. But something happened during those early episodes that changed his understanding of what the show could be. He watched Don Knotts work. He watched the way Don could take a single raised eyebrow, a slight tremor in the lip, a barely perceptible shift in posture, and transform it into something so perfectly human and so completely hilarious that the entire crew would dissolve into laughter between takes. Andy recognized immediately that what Don possessed was rarer than talent. It was genius. And rather than competing with it, he made one of the wisest creative decisions in television history. He stepped back. He became the straight man, the calm center around which Barney Fife's magnificent chaos could orbit freely. That decision didn't diminish Andy Griffith. It elevated him. Because it takes a particular kind of confidence and generosity to willingly hand the spotlight to someone else, and audiences felt that generosity every single week. Not everyone on set shared that same spirit of harmony, however. Frances Bavier, who portrayed the beloved Aunt Bee, brought an entirely different energy to the production. Where Andy preferred a loose, playful atmosphere filled with music and laughter between scenes, Frances preferred discipline and professionalism. She had no patience for practical jokes and rarely joined the informal sing-alongs that broke out regularly during filming. The tension between her serious approach and the show's generally relaxed environment never fully resolved itself. There were moments of genuine conflict, including one memorable incident where George Lindsay, who played Goober Pyle, used language on set that Frances found so offensive she reportedly struck him with her umbrella. The image is almost comically perfect, Ampy wielding an umbrella in righteous indignation, but the underlying friction was real and lasting. Years after the show ended, Andy and Ron Howard made a personal trip to visit Frances at her home in North Carolina, hoping to repair whatever distance had grown between them. She turned them away at the door. Andy never fully understood why. It wasn't until she became seriously ill that she finally reached out with an apology, offering a reconciliation that came almost too late. Some things in real life, it turns out, mirror the show's most painful stories more closely than anyone would have chosen. And that brings us back to the episode that started this conversation. The one that has haunted viewers for decades. The one some fans call banned, others call cruel, and almost everyone who has ever seen it calls the saddest thing the show ever produced. It aired as the 13th episode of Season 6, a season that marked another significant change for the series. For the first time, Mayberry appeared in color. The black and white world that fans had fallen in love with was gone, replaced by something brighter and somehow less intimate. Many devoted viewers felt the shift immediately, as though something essential and irreplaceable had quietly slipped away. And then, into that already changed Mayberry, the writers introduced a story that would divide the show's audience forever. Barney Fife was coming home. Don Knotts had left the regular cast after Season 5, a departure that happened partly because Andy had genuinely believed the show would end after 5 seasons and had encouraged Don to pursue other opportunities. When the network decided to continue, there was nothing to be done. Don had already signed contracts elsewhere. Barney Fife became an occasional visitor to a town he had once defined. His return for this particular episode carried the promise of everything fans had been missing. The familiar face, the familiar voice, the familiar nervous energy that could fill a scene with more comedy than a dozen lesser performers combined. But this episode had something else in mind entirely. The setup is deceptively simple. Mayberry Union High School is hosting its 20th reunion for the class of 1948. Andy, Barney, and Thelma Lou all belong to that class. Barney makes the journey back from Raleigh, where he has been working, and everything feels immediately comfortable and familiar, the way coming home always feels in the first few minutes before reality settles back in. Then Andy mentions, almost casually, that Thelma Lou will also be attending the reunion. And something shifts in Barney's expression. Something hopeful and fragile and dangerously optimistic surfaces in his eyes. Because Barney Fife, despite every distraction and every delay and every missed opportunity, has never stopped believing that Thelma Lou would simply always be there. Waiting. Patient. Loyal. His, whenever he finally decided to reach for her. What he discovers at that reunion shatters that belief completely and permanently. Thelma Lou did wait. She waited longer than anyone had a right to ask. But waiting has a limit that love alone cannot extend indefinitely, and Thelma Lou had finally reached hers. She had moved on. She had found someone who chose her without hesitation, without delay, without a list of reasons why the timing wasn't quite right. She had got married. And the look on Barney Fife's face when he learns the truth is one of the most quietly devastating moments in the history of American television. Don Knotts needed no dialogue to communicate what that moment cost his character. He simply let it show, completely and without defense, and in doing so, he broke the heart of every single person watching.